Rand Paul has gotten a lot of credit, and justifiably so, because he has not been advocating for the all-out worldwide anti-terror war that other Republicans have. And so he's getting a lot of credit for that, and even on this program, Cenk Uygur giving him a lot of credit. But in advance of the elections, don't get too fooled by what he says about foreign policy. We cannot forget what sort of man he is when it comes to domestic policy, and particularly economic policy. And so, thankfully, BuzzFeed has looked back into his past at some of the writings that he did while he was in college, writing for Baylor's the Lariat. And we've got a little bit of it. Now, I'm going to read a section of this, and I want you to try to figure out, as I'm reading it, which economical and philosophical author was behind this ideology that spurred him to write this. So this is what Rand Paul said back in 1985. We have been taught as Christian people that it is wrong to steal, but underlying the whole welfare concept is the principle of theft. Money in the form of taxes is confiscated from the producers in society and redistributed to those who can't or won't produce. The immoral act of stealing, thus, has become moral in the eyes of society. Immediately I sensed the horror-stricken faces of those persons finishing the previous paragraph. Why, he would let the needy starve. My reply would be, how many realistic people believe there are 22 million Americans who need food stamps to survive? How many open-minded people believe 11 million Americans actually need sustenance? Let us assume a highly unlikely percentage, such as half truly need some support. If individuals were not burdened by taxes incurred by this wealth transfer system, the truly needy would surely be supported. Now, Anna, you're an open-minded person. Could you possibly believe that millions of Americans actually need food stamps and other welfare benefits?
I think that they're all making it up.
I mean, think they're making it up.
Look, the fact that minimum wage is not a living wage, and the fact that wages have been stagnant for quite some time while executive pay has increased tremendously doesn't really play a role in, poverty in America at all. So we shouldn't address that at all. But look, as you read me what he wrote in college, first of all, addressing the whole thing about Cenk supporting his foreign policy, I think
in this case,
in this case, politicians are mixed bags. Okay, everything there are gradations in all issues and in all politicians, right? So I see some of Rand Paul's policies, particularly his foreign policy, in some cases to be good. Look, he's against drone strikes and all of that. When it comes to his domestic policy, this is the kind of stuff that I'm not surprised by, because he's been talking about this stuff for a long time. But B, of course I'm against, right? If you're going to address these types of issues, you got to talk about the entire system and why it is that people are dependent on government aid, right? It's not because, yes, there might be some people that are lazy, right? But the real core issue is you have these major corporations that refuse to pay their employees a living wage. That's why you're seeing fast food workers striking and protesting. That's why you have all these very critical media reports on corporations like Wall Street. Well, Wall Street plays a role, but I meant Walmart. So unless you address those issues, you can't really talk about how there are too many people that are dependent on government aid.
Yeah, I love the arrogance of it, that this 18-year-old schmuck is sitting in Baylor writing editorials and saying, I don't think there's really 11 million Americans who are starving out there. And how do I know that? Because I looked out the window on the beautifully kept grounds of Baylor and I didn't see any of them. So how hungry could they be?
Well, and look, to be fair, all college students think that they know everything.
That's
right.
True.
And then you graduate, and then you go out into the real world, and you're slapped across the face by reality, and you realize, oh my God, I know nothing.
Yeah, you evolve, but he apparently didn't. He still believes. Look, I made a reference to an author before. This is Ayn Rand fan fiction that he was writing. He said, this is back in 2009. He said that he cut his teeth on Ayn Rand in high school and has read all of her novels. Now, that was in high school. In college, you see he's writing, this could be sections of Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead here, and he has apparently learned nothing, because this is the same sorts of libertarian, fantastical economic policies that he's still pushing.
So at the heart of libertarianism, you have this obsession with deregulation, right? And the whole argument is you deregulate everything, you let the free market decide, and everything will be fine, right? That's just the way that it works. But every time I do a story like the story we did yesterday about the healthcare industry, right now there's a big problem in New York where people who are getting these major surgeries done go to doctors that are in their insurance network, and they know that their insurance companies will pay for it, right? But then in some cases, as they're unconscious on the hospital bed, the doctors will call in another physician that's out of the network, and then that person will come in, and then the poor patient will get hit with hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases of bills from the out-of-patient physician. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that all up is because you need regulations in place to prevent that kind of activity from taking place. Because who the hell can afford hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? But if you do away with all regulations and you allow private industry to do whatever the hell they want, especially considering the fact that they have a bottom line, then people are going to get screwed, right? So you have deregulation, you're going to get rid of minimum wage, you're going to get rid of certain things that help people earn a decent living in the country, right? And then you're going to sit here and argue that we should do away with all government programs that help the needy. So what do?
You let them starve. The few that aren't lying, I guess.
I don't understand what his solution is.
I don't think that he has a solution. I think that he imagines, in the same way that he did in high school, that if you were to take away all these regulations, all these taxes, the economy would just rev up so much that every single person would end up in a top hat and a monocle. They'd all be so rich, or possibly they could fall back on the charity of churches or something like that. Which is great if you have it available to you, and churches do that sort of work. But let's not forget that there were churches back in the teens and the 20s and the 30s before we had the social the safety net that we have now. And one of the principal causes of death for those who are elderly was starvation and dying in the winter because they couldn't afford to heat their homes and things like that. But this motherfucker right here thinks that because somebody might be lying about not wanting to work, your grandmother should starve and die, and he won't even acknowledge that she exists as she does it. Look, it's great that he doesn't, in most cases, support drone strikes. It's great that he would deregulate our laws about weed or something like that, but he would fundamentally destroy America and how it functions, the way it's functioned and the way it grew strong over the past 70 to 80 years. He would light that on fire.